Hey there everybody, my name is Kellyanne and I'm here to talk to you today about globalization. Now globalization truly is a double-edged sword because despite the fact that it does have many positive benefits, especially in developing nations in which it's developing many jobs, for our American society it has been posing many negative effects on us. And these negative effects can be seen economically, socially, as well as morally and culturally. Firstly, globalization has a negative effect on our economy. Due to the nature of globalization, which is the integration of among nations, this basically provides a front line for collaboration among these foreign nations, which is not good for jobs, because this collaboration basically leads to outsourcing of jobs. And this can be seen through a very prominent American company that we're all familiar with, Apple Inc. According to a New York Times article, Apple Inc. created 280,000 jobs overseas as of 2012. And obviously, with the state of the job market right now, Americans do need these jobs, which can be seen through the American Bureau of Labor Statistics, which shows that 7.3% of the American population is unemployed. And although 7.3% might not seem like such a big number, when you look at it in terms of individuals, as in people, that's 11.3 million people like you and like me who are found jobless currently that are over the age of 16. This same American company created 43,000 jobs in the US, and initially, though this may seem positive, it is a leap down from the 1950s, in which General Motors employed over 400,000 American workers. And in the 1950s, globalization wasn't as prominent as it is today, which obviously shown through the group. Now to my second point. Globalization promotes social inequality, and this can be seen through the promotion of the wealth gap. Outsourcing was not considered a formal business practice until 1989. And from there off, it gained much prominence due to its promotion of cheap labor and a higher profit margin for companies. According to Robert Isaac's book, The Globalization Gap, between 1990 and 2002, the period directly after outsourcing became a formal business practice, the average pay of the worker rose 37%. And although this may seem like something very positive, when you look at the average pay of the CEO that rose in the same time, it was 571%, which is obviously very disproportional. And sorry about that. And on to my next point. Despite the fact that globalization encourages free trade and opens up job opportunities in nations such as India or China, it also promotes the exploitation of labor in these nations. And in doing so, it's promoting negative values. According to an article entitled Corporations and Workers' Rights, in China, the corporation, the company Foxconn, which is the company that provides most of the materials and the products of Apple Inc. Sorry about that. Pays its employees about the equivalent of 1,500 to 2,200 renminbi a month, which is the equivalent to about $1.50 to $2.20 an hour based on the exchange rate of 6.3 renminbi to the dollar. Obviously, this wouldn't go through in the American society for us own workers, therefore showing that we're hardcore exploiting their labor. Also, according to the National Labor Committee, which is a trade union, the Chinese factories, which are producing toys such as these Harry Potter action figures that were found in 2002, as well as Monsters Inc. toys, pay their employees about $0.13 per hour for their work. According to a New York Times article, similarly, Nike uses cheap labor in Southeast Asia, where they get away without using the tighter enforcement and regulations that are held in the US and Europe, and it's actually been also exposed for using child labor. Therefore, this exploitation of labor puts a minimal value on the lives of these workers, and it's belittling them and putting a higher value on American workers who are given rights automatically, therefore promoting the negative value that our lives are above theirs. Next is the loss of cultural identity that is a product of globalization. According to a BBC article, Starbucks is found in around 60 countries, and it creates a homogeneity as the same cup of coffee can be drinking in Tokyo, New York, Bangkok, and Buenos Aires. And although this may not seem like such a bad thing because it is promoting the integration of our culture into other cultures, it's also diminishing the lines that can be seen in cultures if you look at it now. It's basically taking away the idiosyncrasy of the cultures that made it so beautiful and that originally made America known to be the hodgepodge of all of this and gave us our great standing in the first place. In conclusion, although globalization does give many benefits for other nations in the sense of developing jobs, it can be seen that the benefit itself isn't that great considering it is exploiting them, and it does provide a negative impact on our own American society.
Right, well, the subject is identified, but the proposition is just not as specific and clear as it ought to be. The secondary issues, though, were laid out pretty effectively, and I thought that that was kind of an interesting situation, that the supporting points were more clearly stated than the general point that they are supporting. The signposts on the individual points as you get to them is relatively clear. There's just a discussion of a variety of issues that are taking place here, and so I feel it ends up being a little bit surfacey on most of those points. So there's a discussion, for instance, about wage inequity, and you mentioned the difference between the CEO's pay, going up 400% versus the average American's pay going up 30%, and why that is related to globalization, there's no explanation, and why it's a bad thing, there's no explanation, because it sounds like everybody's going up, they're just going up at a different rate. Why does that different rate matter? That's the thing that you have to be able to explain. And how does that rate related to the issue of globalization? I don't really get an explanation about that. Now, the argument about exploitation of labor, I do think that you're kind of acknowledging at the end of the speech when you're summarizing that, well, yeah, there are benefits. People are getting jobs in these other countries as a consequence. So the question is, which is more exploitive, keeping the jobs here or giving the jobs overseas but not giving them the conditions that they would have here? That, I think, is an interesting question, but it requires the context of their employment in those places to be able to answer. So, for instance, in China, if we've got those 40,000 jobs that Apple is, or the 20,000 jobs that are created over there, and they're being paid whatever it was, 13% of what they would be paid here in the U.S., well, what's their cost of living relative to the U.S.? Do they have various benefits that are comparable? I'm not exactly sure that the wages all have to be the same. If they have sustainability, for instance, why does it matter what the wage differentials happen to be? I'm sure that there are more issues on that point, but it doesn't really get developed. And then there's this argument about belittling the cultures, not the cultures, but the labor because of our willingness to pay them less. There's a value argument that's contained in that, and it's not really very well developed. And I think if you're going to make an argument like that, you either have to offer some proof for it, or you have to find the way that you can measure it in a factual standard rather than just, this idea that there's some immorality about seeing them as being worth less. The argument about, loss of cultural identity because people can get Starbucks someplace else, I think that's a real stretch. It's maybe an issue that somebody is worried about, but it sure doesn't seem like it's something that most of us are going to spend our nights sleepless over. Oh my God, they're drinking the same kind of coffee in Tokyo that I'm drinking here in Southern California. Those poor people in Japan, they're losing their cultural identity as a result. If you can show that cultural identity is related to the fast food that people consume, then I think maybe you've got an argument. But there's not really much proof on that on this point. All right, thank you.